Hello, friends. It's your old buddy, Paul c.tumey, here today to talk more about this amazing book, Jimmy, the comic art of James Swinnerton, edited by Peter Maresca and Michael Tisserand, from Sunday Press and distributed by Fantagraphics. Now, in my previous video essay, which if you haven't seen it, check it out. I talked about 4 essayists, right? But I left out somebody, and actually the most distinguished of the bunch. One, Rick Marshall. Rick is the founder and editor of Nemo magazine, and he's published over 75 books devoted to comics history. So his essay here is brief, but it is well worth reading and very insightful. And it talks about the contributions that James Swinnerton made to the art form of comics. One of the things Rick noticed is Swinnerton was among the earliest newspaper cartoonists to spot their blacks. That is, use blacks in a way that it leads the eye through the picture or the comic strip. Check this out. See these blacks here? I love this right here. This is not only an effective use, but it's also a joke, right? He's got this funny black spot. Nice dark blacks. Ties the whole thing together, leads the eye around, and this is just in a single panel. You should just study the blacks in some of these comics. But very insightful essay. Thank you very much, Rick. I did not mean to not include you. It's just me being my usual absent-minded self. Now, speaking of innovations, let's take a look at this page right here in the book. It has 2 comics, 2 half-page comics. And these both are from 1904. The first one is from April 14th, 1904. The first Jimmy comic strip. And the second one comes from April 21st, 1904. The first one is really quite interesting because it's not the usual box. I mean, it is and it isn't, right? It's boxes, but it's done differently. So it's actually like scenes from a movie. The first scene, Jimmy is sent out, a guest has arrived, and they send their son out to the corner store to buy some milk so they can serve their guest. I guess because it's a kid's strip, he's getting milk instead of a bucket of beer or something like that. But check this out, okay? Now it's just like scenes. Scene 2, going for the milk. He's even titled the scenes. And here Jimmy, gets distracted for a while, so this delays him. Scene 3, he's at the store and he's buying the milk. No need to make this panel any bigger. No need to have any extraneous detail like the shelves of goods. This is enough. It gets the point across. And now Jimmy's in the 4th scene, and it's entitled humorously Moving Pictures, which is a bit of a joke because moving pictures were a big deal in 1904. People loved going to the movies, and it was quite a thing. But if you look at this, it is a physical breakdown, almost like keyframes from an animated sequence, of a kid fighting with a little dog who's tugging at his sock, and he loses his balance, and the milk pitcher crashes. Swinnerton, by the way, you'll see this over and over in his comics. He loved drawing dogs and having them bite people. I guess he thought that was one of the funniest things. It's repeated a lot, and it is funny. Peter Maresca has a great essay in here, actually, about Swinnerton's dogs and how funny they were. Nobody could draw a funnier bulldog than Swinnerton, as we've just seen. So waiting for the milk. That's the 5th scene. And they discover the bad news. And then the last scene is Jimmy getting a spanking, which is hidden behind a curtain, mercifully. But this is a common trope in comics. It's not something that's cool today or that anybody would necessarily find particularly funny. But you kind of have to read these a little bit like you'd watch a Warner Brothers cartoon, where an anvil falls on the coyote's head. And, in the next second, he's fine. He's uninjured. But it is interesting that they did this. And I don't know for sure, but I'm wondering if this was a way to make all the chaos that the kids in early comics created. And believe me, Jimmy is mild. He's not malicious. He's just forgetful and sometimes clumsy. But the Katzenjammer kids, Buster Brown, oh my God, they were malicious and they caused all kinds of damage. And that was like the fun part. But you always, at the end, had to have their comeuppance. They had to have their punishment. It's a lot like the comics, the thinking behind the comics code in the early 50s when that was established. And they said, hey, the criminal can never win. Well, here kids can never win, or very rarely do they win. Now let's take a look at the second one. And I'm bringing my special guest to talk to you about it, James Swinnerton himself, Big Jimmy. This is from a radio interview, and I'll put the link to the whole interview down below if you'd like to listen to it. And it is James Swinnerton in the early 1960s.
When did Little Jimmy start? Little Jimmy
later on,
shortly after.
Later on, the editor of the comic and myself were down in Lakewood, down at the big Lakewood Hotel, and we were trying to think up something or other that would make a little hit. And we sat in the bar, which was quite natural in those days for the comics and writers. And in the hallway outside, it was between the billiard room and the bar. They had a large billiard room, and there was the first mail chute that I'd seen.
Mm-hmm.
And a little boy came with a letter that he was supposed, of course, to put in this mail chute. He was from upstairs, like he'd been sent down by his parents, but he saw the billiard game going on, and so he watched the game, and then at last walked away with a letter.
Mm-hmm.
And so we both looked at each other and said, "That's it." And so little Jimmy was built on the idea first of being sent on errands and entrusted with this, that, and the other, and promptly forgetting it on another thing. That fitted so many little Jimmys throughout the United States, became fairly popular.
And that there you have it. I think it's so cool that he put the billiard table scene in one of the first Little Jimmys. This might have been the first one he drew. It was the second one to be published. And notice, did you see all the formal elements? He's showing he's depicting the passage of time with the clock, beautifully, simply, iconically. He's also got Little Jimmy like standing outside the panel to emphasize that he's just watching. He's in his PJs, by the way. And here he starts leaning against the side of the panel as he grows tired. And, that's kind of like a cliche today, but back then, I think this was probably pretty fresh. Okay, so speaking of moving pictures, I want to show you one page here that just knocked my socks off. It made him roll up and down. Jimmy, he sees himself in the moving pictures, and they're going to the movies, right? And they're in the audience, and this is basically a newsreel, okay? And Jimmy, of course, he didn't know that he was in a newsreel, and he's there with his I guess the little baby is part of his family. I'm not sure I've ever known the baby's name. I know Jimmy's last name is Thompson, Jimmy Thompson, which is kind of funny because there was a a great comic book artist, not very well known, named Jimmy Thompson. Anyway, this is his friend, I guess, and this guy is almost always with him. I don't know the story on this guy. He's always in that red striped shirt. But anyway, that's Jimmy's gang, and they're watching the parade go by, and they're in the movie. And so now we're just like the audience. We're watching the movie. This is so meta. It is just so cool. And look at how you have this blue behind it, this blue frame behind it. It just really makes it feel different than your usual comic strip. But what's really, I think, so extraordinary and got me was there were a lot of comics at this time depicting the movies in different ways, but very few actually tried to replicate the experience of watching a movie, the whole experience, the continuity. And this shows you the continuity. So the camera is fixed. It's not moving. And as Jimmy and his pal runs to bring the hat back to the marcher who lost it, they've let the baby go. And now watch this. This is just so cool. The camera is fixed and the baby rolls toward the camera, getting bigger and bigger. And here the audience is laughing, but the parents are probably horrified. And here's Jimmy mugging it up with his pals. And if you can probably find this on YouTube. If you look up Charlie Chaplin, I think it's Kid Auto Races. He's doing something really similar. He's mugging for a news movie camera that's picking up some film footage of it, and it's hilarious what he does. You also see something similar use of the gag in the greatest of all Laurel and Hardy movies, in my opinion, Sons of the Desert. Although Way Out West is, depending upon which day you talk to me, I'll say Way Out West is the best one. Anyway, what a cool page. I mean, just blew my mind when I saw that. I got one more to share with you real quick. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but basically Jimmy buys a book, and he gets an adventure book called The Desert Bride. And look how Swinnerton portrays Jimmy's experience, his vicarious experience of reading the book. Once again, picture and a picture. And I love, the way the scalloped edges of the dream, and how it just kind of morphs organically, intuitively. And he's reading about the adventures, and it gets bigger and bigger, and his eyes get bigger and bigger. And somehow this gets him in trouble, but we won't get into that. But remember when he was getting spanked? Well, he's getting spanked here, but the neighbor says, "Hi, neighbor, lay off on that kid. Wasn't you ever one yourself?" Nice. Man, this book is just full of cool stuff. All right. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time.